This week we're going to be talking about the division of mixed numbers. The first step in doing this work is to make sure that you're changing all of the mixed numbers to improper fractions. Don't change anything else yet, not in this first step. So as we look at our equation, 3 2/3 divided by 4 1/2. In our first one, we look at 3 times 3 plus 2 gives us 11, and that becomes our numerator. We look at the 3, and that simply becomes our denominator. We keep our division signs the same because in this first step, that's all we're doing is changing our mixed numbers into improper fractions. Let's take a look at 4 1/2 and how that becomes 9/2. That becomes 9/2 because 2 times 4 is 8 plus 1 is 9. So that becomes our numerator. Our denominator of 2 is simply carried over. Let's take a look at our second step. As you can see, our second step has two parts to it. And actually, it has a couple of extra parts to it as well to get to our final answer. But let's look at it simply by simply. Our second step is to change the second improper fraction to the reciprocal. Remember, the reciprocal is just simply the opposite or an upside down. Again, we're talking about the second improper fraction. In the first step, we changed 3 2/3 divided by 4 1/2, and we got 11/3 divided by 9/2. Now we're on the second step, which is right here. It asked us to change the second improper fraction to the reciprocal. 9/2 became 2/9. In the second step, we also need to change it into a multiplication problem. Right here, we changed it to a multiplication problem. A lot of times students have trouble and they simply put a multiplication sign right here and forget to deal with the reciprocal. That's where you run into a lot of trouble. Now we can multiply. We look at 11/3 times 2/9. We first look this way to see if we have to cross cancel our 11 or a 9. Nothing cross cancels there. And now we look at our other side, our 2 and our 3. Nothing can cross cancel there. So we simply multiply across. 11 times 2 becomes 22, and 3 times 9 becomes 27. As we take a look at our final answer of 22/7, we know that that is a good answer to have because it's not improper. If it was improper, we should have changed it into a mixed number. In the following problems, I want to show you some common mistakes that students have when doing this kind of work so that you don't make those same kind of mistakes. Let's take a look at our problem. 1 3/8 divided by 3 2/2. It looks like the first step. They took a 1 3/8 and changed it into 11/8. Let's see if that's correct. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 3 is 11, became our numerator, and 8 is our denominator. That looks good so far. They put the division sign because the first step says that we're just changing those mixed numbers into improper fractions. Let's see. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 more is 14. So 14 became our numerator, and we just carried our 4 over as our denominator. That looks good. Let's see what they did next. They took 11/8, which was our first problem. They changed it to a multiplication sign, which was fine. And they took 14/4. That looks okay. But what did they do? They didn't change this into the reciprocal. They simply multiplied across canceling the 8 and the 14 out, and got a strange answer because right there they should have stopped. But instead they didn't. They remembered to cross cancel, but they didn't put the reciprocal right here, so that messed up the whole rest of the problem. So they probably had a teacher say, go ahead and work that problem again. So now here they go again. Here's the second one that they tried. 1 3/8 divided by 3 2/2. Again, they changed the first mixed numeral into 11/8, which is correct. They put the division symbol over, which is correct. They took 3 2/2 and changed it into 14/4. That looks good. Yay. Let's look at what they did next. They carried over the 11/8, which is good. They changed it into a multiplication problem. Excellent. Keep going. Looks good so far. Then they took 14/4 and changed it into the reciprocal. Yay, that looks good. But look what happened. For their final answer, they simply multiplied across. And those are correct. However, what did they forget to do? They forgot to cross cancel. 11/14 they couldn't cross cancel, but 4/8 they couldn't cancel. So they got a huge number when they just multiplied 11 times 4, 44, 8 times 14 is 112, but that can't be the final answer because look, what we know about reducing fractions, what do both the numerator and the denominator end in? They both end in even numbers. So you know that when you have something that ends in even numbers, you can continue to go further. Cross canceling and reducing are the biggest things that students forget to do. All right, so let's take a look at their third attempt. 1 3/8 divided by 3 2/4. Again, they changed 1 3/8 into 11/8. That looks good. Kept the division sign because the first step says just to turn them into improper fractions. So 3 2/4 became 14/4. Yay, looks good, thumbs up. Then they took 11/8, changed our division sign into a multiplication sign, and look with the second term, they did remember to take the reciprocals. The reciprocal of 14/4 is 4/14. Thumbs up, keep going. Now what did they do? It looks like in this one, how did they get from 11/8 to 11/2? It looks like they were thinking about, should I cross cancel this way? No, but could I cross cancel this way? I could indeed. So they looked at the 4 and they looked at the 8 and they said, well, how many 4s go into 4? 1. And that's where they got the 1. How many 4s fit into 8? 2. And that's how they got the 2. So their new fraction problem became 11/2 times 1/14. And then they simply multiplied across. 11 times 1 became 11, and 2 times 14 became 28. We know that that's a thumbs up because that's a regular proper fraction. If this was an improper fraction, we would have had to change into a mixed number. So as you can see, there's many issues that can go wrong, but make sure you follow your steps. We're going to do some you try it's. Here's our first you try it. 4 4/5 divided by 2 2/5. Pause the video, get a paper and pencil out, work the problem, and let's see if you got the same answer as we did. All right, we took 4 4/5 to change to improper fractions because that's our first step. We have to change both of these into improper fractions. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 4. Our numerator became 24. Our denominator just carried over to be 5. We kept our division sign because the first step is simply changing into improper fractions. I'm going to do that with the second term. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. That became our numerator, and 5 just carried over to be our denominator. In our next step, we kept the first term the same. 25 fifths stayed 25 fifths. The division symbol became a multiplication symbol, and we took the reciprocal of the second term. So 12 fifths became 5 twelfths. Now, we have to look on both sides to see if we have anything we can cross cancel. Let's look at this side first. 5 can go into 5. That's easy. How many 5s fit into 5? 1, and that became our numerator. How many 5s fit into this one? 1, that became our denominator. We can also cross cancel on this side with the 12 and the 24. How many 12s fit into 12? 1. And how many 12s fit into 24? That became our 2. Now we simply just multiply across. 2 times 1 equals 2, and 1 times 1 equals 1. We know that when we have 2 over 1, it simply means 2. Here's another you try it. 3 and 1/6 divided by 2 and 4/5. Get your pencil and paper ready, pause the video, and then we'll work through the problem together. The first step says to change our mixed number division problem into improper fractions. So let's do that. In the first term, 6 times 3 is 18, plus 1 more is 19, which became our numerator. 6 is our denominator, and we just carried that over. We carry over our division sign because our first step says that we don't do anything with the sign yet. 2 and 4/5 becomes 5 times 2 is 10, plus 4 is 14, which becomes a numerator. And we carry the 5 over into our second term. Now we know that we just leave our first term the same. We turn our division symbol into a multiplication, and we take the reciprocal of the second term. The reciprocal of 14/5 is 5/14. We look to see if there's anything that we can cross cancel on both sides, and we see that there's not, so we just multiply across. 19 times 5 is 95. 6 times 14 is 84. We see that this is an improper fraction, and we know that we have to change it into a mixed number for our final answer. So that becomes 1 and 11/84. One more you try it, and then you'll be ready to start. Our last you try it. 1 and 1/6 divided by 2 and 1/4. Get your pencil paper ready, work the problem, and here we go. 1 and 1/6 became 7/6. We put our division sign in the same spot. 2 and 1/4 became 9/4. That's our first step. Pretty easy. Our second step, our first term stays the same. Our division symbol becomes a multiplication symbol. And our second term, we take the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 9/4 is 4/9. Now, we look at our two sides to see if we can cross cancel anything, and we can't cross cancel the 7 or the 9, but we can cross cancel the 4 and the 6. How many 2's fit into 4? 2. How many 2's fit into 6? 3. So now we have our new equation, and we simply multiply across. 7 times 2 is 14. 3 times 9 is 27. We know that 14/27 is an excellent answer because it's not an improper fraction that has to be changed into a mixed number. I know that this was a long video. Please watch it as many times as you need to so that you can work the worksheet problems. Good luck!